Hello and welcome to today's grand incident, Mega Man. It's a series that I've already talked about before. To summarize myself from the past, it's a long-running series that inspired many people to make their own games of a similar style, and Touhou is not an exception. Now the game I talked about way back when was Touhou Rock Maiden, and in that video, I mentioned how I considered it to be the lesser known of these classic style fan games. The reason for this is because 7 years prior to Rock Maiden, a different Touhou fan game of the same genre was released, and it was made by a group you might have heard of before. That's what I wanted to talk about today, Touhou's first fan game to ever attempt the Mega Man style, which was created by the same guys that gave us Super Marisa Land. The game known as MegaMari, Marisa no Yabou. The game was released on May 21st, 2006 by Dojin Circle Twilight Frontier, and is a Mega Man style game starring the ordinary magician Kirisami Marisa, along with fellow magician Alice Margatroyd. The story here is Patchouli is sick of Marisa taking her things, so she creates another world within her library for some peace and quiet. Marisa decides to invade because she doesn't like that. So why is Alice tagging along? That's a great question. The game starts right away on the boss select screen, with your choice of 8 characters to fight, those being Reimu, Chirno, Sakuya, Youmu, Eren, Reisen, Yuyuko, and Remilia. Now the controls, but first this game's main quirk. You can switch between Marisa and Alice through the pause screen. Each character has their own health bar and a different base shot, but they fundamentally work the same. Marisa has a standard buster shot, and Alice has a long-range laser. Neither can charge their shot or slide, by the way. Along with the base shots, both characters also have a unique ability, and different boss abilities. When you defeat a boss, they drop their ability, and whoever picks it up gains said ability. Only one person can get it though, so you have to choose wisely. Here's an example. Yomu's ability grants Marisa a single slash. The same ability grants Alice a circle of death and destruction that shreds almost every enemy in the game to pieces within seconds. So yeah, choose wisely. The unique abilities are granted through certain requirements. Marisa gets the broom, aka item 2, after 4 bosses are defeated, and Alice gets a Shanghai doll she can call that attacks for her, if she collects 4 boss abilities. So that's the gist of the gameplay. Pretty straightforward with a neat gimmick that encourages replayability through the boss powers being divisible between Marisa and Alice, so you can not only do different boss orders, but run different abilities. Now the real question, how does this all go in practice? Well, if this was all there was to the game, then it goes well. However, there are a number of things between the lines that make this game a rather unenjoyable experience overall. Let's start with the characters, specifically Alice. Alice's starting shot is a long-range laser that hits continuously, has higher DPS the closer to Alice the enemy is, and Alice is free to move around while firing. The drawbacks to this shot is that it's weaker than Marisa's, but given all those benefits I just listed, surely that's fair. Well, maybe it would be if it weren't for a few extra bits. Did you notice how I didn't say piercing? Yeah, this long laser only hits one enemy at a time. It also can't hit airborne enemies consistently. They just fall through the hitbox sometimes. At least the rate of fire is good. Except any halfway decent match with Marisa easily beats it out. So after all of that, what benefits does Alice's laser have over Marisa? Yeah, so until you get some boss abilities, Alice is a glorified health bar. Speaking of that, while both characters have their own health bar, only one of them has to go down for it to count as a life. Game overs strip away all of your E-tanks, and life drops are so rare they might as well not even be in the game. Game overs also force you to redo the entire stage you died on, and oh boy are some of these stages a barrel of fun to go through. First, a petty comment. Some of the stage graphics are gross looking. Some of Yomu's stage assets remind me of Yoshi's Island, if Yoshi's Island was a bootleg. And Chirno's stage background, which I'm positive is supposed to be a frozen waterfall, looks more like a dragged pop-up on a laggy computer. Beauty in the eye of the beholder and all that, I know. That's why I called it petty. But the visuals aren't the only problem. Let's take a look at some of my favorite stages, starting with Sakuya. The first half of the stage is nothing crazy. Then you have to start ascending spike traps. Here's a portion where the trap falls on you, while the floor below it is also a trap. If you activate the trap at the wrong time, you desync them, meaning you'll have to either fix it or damage boost. The next screen is the real kicker. Spike traps positioned with a 1-tile leeway, requiring a perfect jump to grab the ladder past the trap, or damage boost. One of the final sections is Yoku blocks and spiked platforms. I wish this one was as simple as a damage boost. Now let's go to add-in stage. The final part has these taste ships descend, and when they match your horizontal position, they fly at you. These things aren't exactly frail, they tend to spawn over pits, and my god, the downtime between spawns is non-existent. I would love to see the developer's intended route for this part, because without stopping time, it feels like a crapshoot whether you damage boost through enough of it. Now you could argue that these levels are just difficult, and not that badly designed. However, I won't hear that argument for this next stage. Youmu stage is 3 sections, an auto-scroller boat ride, and 2 staircases. The boat ride is what it is, but holy hell the stairs. You have to jump up them. The enemies just keep coming as you climb, including fairies that spawn above and below the stairs. Certain sections of the staircase have these yin-yang orbs that roll towards you, and they do about 1/4 of your max health. But don't run too far away from them, or they'll simply respawn, along with all the other things that appeared alongside them. Alice's ability from Youmu is a homing amulet that works like magnet missile, that is very good at getting through the boat and staircase, as the homing ability lets it go through the ground to hit the fairies. Now on the second staircase this still applies, except the fairies that spawn out of immediate reach here take 5 shots to take out. Taking this slow just doesn't work out, so I damage boosted off the weaker enemies to get through the orbs until I was through. The funny thing is, Alice's amulet and damage boosting makes this level pretty easy, but that doesn't excuse its bad design. Now, the bosses. Bosses have a respectable array of attacks, and almost all of them have a phase 2 that they enter at low health. Now the fun part. They are relatively random, and the majority of their attacks are a harsh reminder that you're playing a Touhou game. This has been apparent throughout the stages, but bullet density is quite high in this game. This is compensated by your smaller hitbox, but I have no idea where said hitbox is, and you're trying to navigate around attacks through classic Mega Man options, which is not as omnidirectional as actual Touhou. Back to the bosses. Yeah, they throw a lot of stuff at you, but the main issue I take from them is with the second phases. They sound cool, but they're basically just an obnoxious attack that becomes the only one they'll use until someone loses. With weaknesses, this isn't so bad. With buster shots though, it's a thrill and a half. I should also mention that when a boss is shot down, their bullets don't immediately go with them, so you can still get hit. There's nothing wrong with requiring the player to pick up the ability to truly end the stage. But did they really have to imitate the lingering bullets when a boss explodes? Oh yeah, those abilities. See, I said they make for a good replayability factor because you can choose who gets what. And this would be the case if some of the abilities weren't hilariously better than their counterparts. Alice's abilities are generally better, and at least not all of Marisa's abilities are as laughable as Youmu. But it does kinda cut into the part of wanting to play with different abilities when there's often a clear better option. That about sums up the average gameplay experience. At least not every moment of the game is pain, as the stages I didn't mention are relatively fine. Youmu, Remilia, and Racen have a few moments, but nothing outside of what you'd expect to see in Mega Man. Chuno's stage has ice physics, and Yuyuko's stage does have some Yoku blocks, but they're not anything worse than what Iceman or Heatman pulled. So that just leaves the Wily stages, and I'm going to be going a bit into each one as opposed to a general overview, because each stage is its own special form of hell to at least someone, especially the first one. This first stage is a shining example of almost every annoyance within the game, and it wastes absolutely no time demonstrating that. Look at this first section. It is cluttered to hell and back with enemies, and in the middle of it, there's a spike platform with Yoku blocks. That's the whole section. A jump and a million enemies. Fantastic opener to the back half of the game. The rest of the stage is not as awful looking as this, up until you fall into the magical red world of quick band lasers at the end. I don't like these sections, and I never will. My biggest issue with them isn't actually the trial and error or the precision aspects. It's with how their inclusion tends to mean one of the bosses is saddled with a useless ability. Unsurprisingly, Sakuya is footing this bill. But I will defend this one, as it's a temporary pause with an attack, and it costs a set amount. Much better than Flashman's version. Alice's ability from Sakuya is pretty good too, but it doesn't stop time. Now I'm not saying time stop is required to clear these portions, but it's obviously an expected solution. And if you didn't get Sakuya's ability with Marisa, well then I guess it's just time to get good. So the first screen is packed tight with enemies, and close to the end is death by laser. But you only have to do it once so long as you defeat the boss. And that brings us to one of the worst bosses I have ever seen in a Mega Man game, fan or official. Yukari. The arena is this, and the bottom is a pit. Yukari shoots a big ball in your direction, then leaves Ron and Chen to spin around shooting, then aim and fire themselves at you. Yukari becomes vulnerable a bit after the spinning duo takes off, for about 3 seconds, then you'll have to do it all over again. This fight feels like fighting a yellow devil if the yellow devil was the whole room. Getting into position to damage her is a pain in the ass, let alone just keeping your footing. And the actual window you have to do so is pathetic. This is Wily 1, the worst stage in the entire game by a landslide. And one of the main reasons I think the replayability takes a major hit, because the stage is terrible. So why would you ever want to do it without the abilities that make the worst parts of it a bit more bearable? The only positive thing I will say is that I think it's funny how Yukari goes kaboom when you beat her. Wily 2 has a few rooms that feel straight up ripped from Mega Man 2, and it opens with a broom section. That's kinda it? I don't know, this stage doesn't really stick out. Probably due to it not being nearly as awful as the last one. So you just get to the end and get a wake-up call from the boss. It's actually the Yellow Devil this time. But as far as Yellow Devil bosses go, this one's actually pretty neat. Suika has a few different attacks she can do when she forms. Her whole body takes damage, and even the way she reforms has some variety. The pace of the fight isn't painfully slow, even with only buster shots. And while it doesn't affect the gameplay, I think Suika is a very good choice of character to be this type of boss. I do wish she didn't try to pull an early 2000s creepypasta on me upon defeat though. Now for Wily 3. Marisa and Alice get split up, so you're going solo Marisa, in a stage that looks like Super Marisa Land. It's a cute stage, a bit heavy on the enemies at some parts, but overall not that bad. The boss is the classic doppelganger, but with a twist. At half HP, the doppelganger goes 8-head on you. Her pattern is straightforward and more than manageable with a base shot. This is pretty important considering you don't have access to Alice, so if you turned her into an ability pack mule, you'd be in an even worse spot than Wily 1. That immediately brings us to Wily 3B, Alice's solo stage. I hate it. It's stinky. Marisa's base shot works well in her stage, because her base shot actually works. Alice's laser sucks, and those Tay ships spawn over pits at some points, so you better hope you gave Alice something for them. My favorite part of the stage is this one, because it makes it abundantly clear that Alice's laser hitting one enemy at a time is intended, and it doesn't even do enough damage to take the bunny out from full screen before she crashes into you. So how do you give Alice a boss that can be fought decently with only that laser? The answer? Making the boss a massive, unmoving hitbox. Most of the area below Aki can be damaged, so this fight is about hanging out on the left side and bunny hopping with your laser. Most of Aki's attacks force you to maintain that distance anyways. Honestly, the fight works pretty well for Alice's laser. If not for the peanut gallery tossing both bullets and themselves at you. If the laser could reliably hit airborne enemies, it would be fine. But it doesn't. So you just have to hope you have good luck, or gave Alice Aki's weakness way back when. Wily 4, it's the boss rematches. They're no different from the original, so on to Patchy. Patchy is a pretty good fight. She has a good variety of attacks that aren't too overbearing, although some are trickier to dodge than others, especially when her position gets funky. After a certain number of hits, she retreats, and then she's in a good old Wily machine. It has 2 phases. Big surprise. And phase 2 gets more chaotic. There's a number of effective abilities to hit it with, but I don't really know how bad the fight truly is, as I E-tank through it every time. Mostly because losing makes you fight Patchy again, and a game over takes the E-tanks away anyways, on top of it meaning boss rematches again. Finally, Wily 5, because of course there's one. Patchy's now in a Wily capsule, because why not? It's more obnoxious than it is difficult, and like the last stage, you have to refight it every time you die on the final boss. That final boss is an old classic, the big robot Patchouli, or I guess you could call her Hisotenmukyu. It's a fight, I guess, only the face takes damage, making one of the ideal spots to attack the platform covered by the health bars. This boss has a neat phase too. She charges up a beam in her image that instantly kills you. These get mixed into her attack pattern, it's not a one-time thing. I'd be more upset about this if you couldn't just melt her with her weakness. Still have to dodge at least one though. Robot Patchy goes kaboom, and Marisa is seen running with a bunch of books. And no Alice. Only to find her house has been destroyed by the Wily capsule. What a fantastic closer. MegaMari is a real pain in the ass kind of game, and not even in the way Mega Man games tend to be. I do think the game has some cool ideas, like the multiple characters and abilities, the additional boss phases, and the way Wily 3 works. Unfortunately in practice, these ideas are weighted preference due to an ability's strength and effectiveness. Phase 2s are more obnoxious than they are interesting, and Wily 3, specifically Alice, can become the worst stage in the game if you are poorly equipped for it. There are some positives to it though. For starters, the character and sprite art are quite good. and the music is nice enough that replaying a level a few times isn't too bad. Funny enough, I think some of the best instances in the game come from the Wily stages. Suika is a fine boss, as far as Yellow Devils go. Wily 3 Marisa is designed in a way that doesn't make you feel stranded if you didn't give Marisa the right ability, and Patchouli is a cool fight. The problem is so many of the game's issues are littered throughout these stages as well, so by the time you reach anything enjoyable, your mood is already more than soured. I think a lot of the troubles boil down to one thing, really. It's that MegaMari wanted to retain Touhou elements that it probably shouldn't have. Enemies and bosses fire a lot of bullets. You're expected to dodge like it's a Touhou game, using the control scheme of a Mega Man game. I don't think any of it feels particularly good to dodge either, since a lot of the time you're just hugging the corner and hopping. Some of the boss attacks would probably feel more satisfying if you weren't subjected to them for so long. Thing is, this crossover of elements was done later on in Taco Man. Granted that it is closer to Mega Man Zero, but it gives the player more movement options. The ability to go through bullets, and the amount of damage bullets do is very minimal. MegaMari may not have as many bullets as Taco Man, but I think if any of those things I just listed were in the game, it would make a world of difference. Regarding the Circle, Twilight Frontier, they are still active to this day. Shocker. Twilight Frontier has been in the game for years now, with their latest entry in the official games being Go Yoku Ibun. MegaMari is actually the group's third Touhou game, released only a year after Super Marisa Land. Those two games have a bit in common, in that they're both well-known Touhou fan games, and they're remembered more fondly than they deserve to be. But that's what over a decade of nostalgia does to a person. With all that said, time for the rating. MegaMari, Marisa no Yabou, is a ranked Chirno of a game. Let me explain why. Well, there's not much to say really. It's a Mega Man game from 2006, so all the Touhou characters are ones you'd likely recognize, even if you're not into the series. The only thing I think you'd miss out on by not knowing anything about Touhou is that some of the boss attacks are pretty good recreations of the character's spell cards, or not understanding why Suika works as a Yellow Devil stand-in. These things don't really matter, since in the moment you're getting hit by them, they're just an annoyance. And regardless of what you know about Suika, seeing her explode into a bunch of mini-me's is pretty funny. Would you agree or disagree? Let me know what you think. MegaMari was a game I played early on when I was getting into Touhou, and I remembered it being difficult, but enjoyable. After going through some different Mega Man games and returning to MegaMari, I found a lot of the things I pardoned as just Mega Man things weren't even Mega Man things. A lot of my issues with this game stem from its desire to incorporate Touhou elements. I respect the attempt, but it falls flat for me. If you're interested in a Touhou-themed Mega Man game, then I think Rock Maiden is the better choice. There's 5 games in that series too, so if you enjoy it, there's plenty more. I doubt I'll ever play this game myself again, and if you do decide to check it out despite what I've said, I highly recommend you at least look into weaknesses ahead of time. MegaMari will remain a classic regardless of my opinion of it, so if there's anything to truly take away from this video, it's to be wary of nostalgia propaganda. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.